Welcome to another episode. Today's episode is the final episode in the short series about how to make your own chandeliers out of junk. Now, these are doll's house chandeliers, they're miniature things, and if you've been following along so far, you'll know that these have been made out of copper pipes, bent into shape, and then soldered, and then LEDs and things added later. Today's episode is going to be about the surface finish, and we're going to nickel plate the surface. So it's going to be electroplating. There are three things that you need to get to do this. Three important things. The first thing is vinegar, just normal household vinegar, which is green, because I have converted this already into nickel acetate. But I got that from Walmart. Asda Walmart. It's a supermarket in the UK, but I think Walmart is a familiar name too. It's regular normal white vinegar for cooking. Now, the reason it's green is because I've changed the solution into nickel acetate, and we do that by using the next thing on the list, which is a bar of nickel, just a metal rod or a metal plate. That can be found on eBay, it can be found in cutlery drawers, it can be found all over the place. But you really want to make sure that it is nickel and not nickel plated. So once you've got your bar of nickel, the next thing you need to do is find a battery. Now, I use the smaller batteries, AA's, AAA's, things like that, because I prefer the lower voltages. And for this purpose, the lower voltage is better for two reasons. It's safer, and it gives you a better surface finish. The higher voltages tend to make a more brittle, more rough kind of finish. So those are the three essential things that you're going to need for this. The other things, of course, might be yogurt pots, containers, things like that, and rubber gloves, because you don't want to touch any of this stuff if you can help it, because it is a metal infused in acid, and metals, they can be good for us, magnesium, zinc, and iron, we all consume them. But there are some poisonous metals too, like mercury, arsenic, and lead. But nickel acetate isn't good either. It's a little bit poisonous. So be aware of that. Take the precautions that you need. The first thing we're going to do with this is check the model to see if the surface is clean, free from dirt, and ready to be plated. The way I do this is by using a multimeter to slightly touch the surface, to gently find out if there's any places where a current can't pass. Sometimes this happens if there's grease on your fingers and you handled the object. Sometimes there could be some lacquer or paint or something like that in the way. So it's always good just to check to make sure that there is continuity. The next step is to make the actual solution, and all that is, in this case, is a bit of vinegar in a yogurt pot with a bar of nickel cut in half, and each terminal on the battery connected to the nickel bar. Now, as you can see here, it's bubbling there. It will take a long time to produce this. So once it's turned green in about 3 hours, that's when you know it's ready for use. That's when you can use the solution to electroplate. Now, this is our solution of nickel acetate. And to move on, what we need to do is unclip those battery terminals. We need to connect the negative terminal to the thing that we are wanting to plate, which in this case is the chandelier, and the positive lead will always go onto the nickel bar. Now, the ions want to flow from the positive to the negative, so once the reaction is happening, you'll notice that your model or the object that you want to plate starts bubbling and fizzing. This is because something else is happening, something called electrolysis. And this is because the electronic charge, the charge in the liquid, is reacting with the liquid. It's forming a gas, usually hydrogen and perhaps a little bit of chlorine if there's some salt in there. Now, on a bigger scale, that can be problematic because hydrogen gas is flammable and chlorine gas is poisonous. So be aware of that too. At a small scale like this, it's not going to be a problem because a yogurt pot is tiny and the amount of gases that come off this isn't going to be something to really worry about, especially if you're in a ventilated room. But it is something to be aware of. Once you can see the bubbling happening, you know that effect, that reaction is taking place, and you know that everything is fine. The only thing you need to concentrate on now is really the art of electroplating, which a lot of the techie sort of channels and videos won't probably mention, but there is an art to this. Now, when the bubbles form around the object, it also prevents some of the metal from brightening up. And when I mean brightening up, I mean the bright chrome effect that we all imagined to come out of this once we're finished. It's going to be sometimes difficult to achieve a really bright, nice finish. There's a few reasons for that. The first one is the bubbles. So you need some way of either stirring the pot, dunking the item in and out of the liquid just to free up those bubbles. Some people use pumps. There's all sorts of ways of doing it, but that's some of the issues that you might get. Another issue that you might get is that the transfer of ions from the metal bar to the object is something that happens in a straight line. So, for example, if your object, like the chandelier, has arms, then if the arms of the chandelier are closer to the metal bar, then what you're going to find is that the metal bar starts coating the arm of the chandelier in more metal than the surface of the area behind that. Now, that can work out okay if you keep on moving the part around, but sometimes, like the chandelier, there are bars all the way around, so it's going to prefer to attach itself to the closest place it can find, which means sometimes the areas behind that aren't going to get a chance to have a nice coating of metal. And when that's the case, we would need to use a different kind of technique. But we can compare and use both techniques. And I'll go over the next technique in a second because it's something that I did use on this model as well. This is probably the result of about an hour's worth of plating. So you can see here that it's quite silvery. You can see that it does look quite nice. If you look close up, of course, you can see that I haven't polished the surface. I haven't made the metal absolutely free of any imperfections. But you can kind of realise that the effect is working. Now, I left this in the pot for a lot longer than I should have done, which meant that the whole thing turned a kind of grey, black, dull finish. So I had to sort of take it out and restart. I've given it a clean solution of vinegar there. As you can see, I've stripped it down. Well, not stripped it down, but I've polished it up a bit. As you can see, it's back to almost copper. Now, that nickel plating is so thin that although it might look nice and silvery, just a slight wipe will be able to take some of that silver off. Now, this is the alternative way of doing it. As you can see, I'm concentrating on the areas behind the arms of the chandelier. And all this is exactly the same process. It's just that I'm using a brush to do it. Now, this brush is actually a Q-tip, which is one of those things that you would clean your ears with, or nose, or something else. It's something found in the health section in supermarkets. It's also called a cotton bud. Now, I've cut it and clamped it around into my not zinc, it's nickel, isn't it? Nickel bar. So I've clamped it into my nickel bar and I've connected the leads up, the battery leads to the bar and then to the thing. And as you can see there, it is slowly, it's more slow this way. It does take a longer time to do it like this, but it can get to those places where you can't reach the other way. It gives you a thorough sort of plating. Now I combined mine with the other way and this way, so we had sort of a nice coverage. While I was there, I thought I'd try plating something else that I'm working on too. Now this is a piece of a heater, and I'm going to metal plate it to see how it goes. It's mild steel, it's just normal steel, and you can nickel plate steel, so I'm going to give it a go and see what happens. And as you can see, it's bubbling away, so I know that the ions are attaching themselves to the surface of that, and I will come back in a moment to find that it's completely rusted in areas. Of course, vinegar, that's what's causing it. Also, there are patches of this that haven't taken at all. I don't know if you can see there, but you can see a slight discoloration. I'm not talking about the rust, I'm talking about the silvery metal, because it's difficult being the same colour, you know, the metal is the same colour as the metal being plated, so it's difficult to highlight exactly where has taken some and where hasn't. So generally I think this part was really rusty when I first had it, and it remained so rusty that it was pitted, the surface was pitted, and I don't think the nickel liked the pitted areas, so those areas remained free and open, which then started rusting again, and that's why there's so much rust on this. But of course we can also use white vinegar for making patinas and things like that for other things. For example, like things like this, it can be patinaed using vinegar. So yeah, I don't know if you can see that. You probably can't. I'm using vintage lenses, so I don't have autofocus on that. But there we go. If you enjoyed this video, if you liked this episode, then give me a thumbs up, smash that like button, and I'll see you in one of the other videos.